morning or wherever you are in the world. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you, DoD FinRed, for inviting us. We appreciate the opportunity to talk about this issue. And yes, we're from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or as we like to be called now, the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection. We're in the Office of Servicemember Affairs. I'll get into that in a minute about who we are. But I'm glad to see that we have we have a couple parents, a couple students, but advisors, people who are responsible for giving new students and new families advice about how they're going to pay for school. So this is a two-part series. We're going to focus today on the paying for college, before you go to school aspect of it, and then next week we're going to focus on what do you do if you actually have student loans. That gets us to the next slide. This is the legal stuff, the disclaimer. Basically, this is an off-the-record presentation, so if there's any reporters on here, please don't quote us. All right, next, who am I? My name is Patrick Campbell. I am a veteran. I served in Operation Iraqi Freedom. After I got back, I served 5 years for a veterans organization, and then for the last 6 years, I've worked for the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. What is the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection? We were created after the 2008 financial crisis. Our purpose is to make sure markets work for consumer products across America. But basically, if you had to boil it down to its core elements, we make sure that consumers have the information they need before they make big financial choices, like paying for college. We specifically work in the Office of Servicemember Affairs, so our mission is to educate and empower consumers. That's service members, veterans, and military families. We monitor for complaints, and then we coordinate consumer protection issues among different federal and state agencies. This is all just the fun stuff. So the question I have for everyone, we have a poll on this in a second, is what do you want to know about? There are lots of different ways to paying for college. What are some topics that, we're going to cover them all in somewhat, but, if I had to spend a little bit more time on one than the other, what issues do you think are the most important? So I'd be curious to see your thoughts. So feel free to put fill out the poll now. Thank you for doing that. I think I moved something, I'm sorry. Sorry, I must have touched something. Okay. So it looks like a little bit of everything, which is good. This is a lot of the stuff that we're going to cover. I'll spend a little bit less time on grants, which is fine. All right, good. So like I said at the outset, the goal of this presentation is to talk about how someone pays for college. What are the different options that are available to them? What are some of the tricks of the trade for maximizing those benefits? What are some of the pitfalls to avoid? And basically, I want this to be interactive. So as we go along, I want people to be asking questions. Like I just got a question below about one of the things you want to talk about, how to balance military benefits, student loans, and saving for college. I want this to be interactive. I know we're not talking to each other, but at least feel free to write a question. I will do my best to answer them. Please don't save them till the end because you'll forget. Otherwise, if you're like me, you'll spend the whole webinar, just trying to keep the question in your head, and you won't be paying attention to anything else. So the first part we're going to go over is what benefits are available to you from the federal government. We're going to go over each of those benefits, and then we're going to talk about benefits that are available from other sources, and then we will talk about like grants, and then we'll talk about private student loans. And Amy, I will definitely get to the how do we balance between these. One of the things I want to go over is if you had to choose which benefits to use in which order. I call it hierarchy of benefits, which ones make the most sense at different times. All right, any more questions before we get started? All right. Okay. So I want to start off with the Post-911 GI Bill, mainly because I spent so much time working on it. But the Post-911 GI Bill is the most generous GI Bill benefits since World War II. Basically, it provides a benefit that is very similar to what our grandfathers received after they served. It pays tuition and fees. If you are attending a public school, it'll pay the in-state tuition, whether or not that's undergraduate or graduate. So if you happen to be using the Post-911 GI Bill at medical school and public school, they will pay your medical school fees or even your tuition for law school. If you're attending a private or a for-profit school, they will pay you up to $21,000, I think it's maybe even $22,000 per year in tuition and fees. So that's paid directly to the school. There's other benefits that are paid directly to you. So depending on where the school is located, the student would be eligible to receive a monthly living allowance that's based on the BAH rate for where that school is. So if you were to look up, a school and say, you would look up their zip and say, what is the BAH rate for an E5 with dependents at that zip code? And that's the rate students will receive at that school. So that can be anywhere from about $1,000 to $3,000 where you are in the country. And then there's an additional program called Book Stipend, which provides $1,000 for books. So all told, we're talking about a pretty significant benefit, especially when you compare it to the older GI Bill benefits. There are two other benefits that are associated with this. There's something called the Yellow Ribbon Program. So if you're attending a private school, or as an out-of-state student for a public school, some schools have entered into a program called the Yellow Ribbon Scholarship Program with the VA, and that basically says that for every dollar that is not covered by the GI Bill, for every dollar the school kicks in the scholarship, the VA will match. So that could be up to the full cost of tuition, even at a very expensive private school. The last thing is that the new GI Bill, when it came in, the president at the time wanted to make sure that people weren't getting out in droves to go, to leave the war effort. So they wanted to make sure there was a retention benefit. So they allowed service members who have served at least 6 years in the military to be eligible to transfer their unused GI Bill benefits to their spouse or their dependent. We will go much more into detail into this, but this is just an overview of the program. There are other GI Bill benefit programs, but the bulk of people who are using the GI Bill use this GI Bill benefit. So I know that was very complicated and a lot of benefits, and it was very, when we first introduced the legislation and got it passed, there were so many questions about how much was my benefits going to be. So I worked at the VA for a year and helped them develop this tool called the GI Bill comparison tool. It basically combines 17 to 25 different websites into a single web page that calculates your GI Bill benefits, lets you search through all 16,000 approved schools, and tells you a lot of cool information about those schools. So we're actually going to show you that GI Bill comparison tool now, because I think if you're going to remember one website from this webinar, I hope you remember this, because this is a jumping off point. From here, you should be able to get almost anywhere else that we're talking about. We're going to switch to my screen. I hope this works. I'll see you in a second. All right. Awesome. So this is the GI Bill comparison tool. It is at vets.gov/GI Bill comparison. And so basically, it starts off by asking you a couple of questions about yourself. Are you a veteran? Are you on active duty? Are you a spouse? Which GI Bill you want to use? The Post-911 GI Bill, you have to serve at least 90 days of active duty service since 9/11 to qualify for some of it. You need to serve 36 months of active duty service or 3 years to qualify for all of it. And then it asks you, how are you going to take your classes? Are you going to be online or in person or online? Or the So we're in DC here, and we have an obscene number of colleges called George Washington. So we're just going to try out a George Washington. Type in George Washington, press enter, and we're going to get a list of 9 schools that are approved for the GI Bill. So let's say George Washington University. Tells you a little bit right here. It's got 1,300 GI Bill students. You get a little quick snapshot of what the benefit is there. You can get tuition up to $22,000 per year there. A monthly housing allowance of about $2,300 and books. So let's drill in a little bit deeper here. Let's find out a little bit more about George Washington University. So you click on the Learn More, and it actually takes you to a school profile page for that school that tells you more. So you see where it's located, the type of school it is. You scroll down, and then you get this, what we call the benefit estimator, that will tell you how much you may get. Ask a few more questions and tells you how much you maybe get to attend this program. So George Washington, I think, is one of the most expensive schools in the country at $51,000 per year. But they also have a lot of yellow ribbon scholarships for veterans. So let's say you're one of those lucky yellow ribbon recipients. Click yes. You say you're going to get a $10,000 scholarship from the school that the VA will then match. You're enrolled full time. You come over to the right side of the page, and you're going to see a quick calculation. GI Bill is going to pay $42,000 to the school, including the yellow ribbon. Considering you're being charged $51,000, that means leaves you out of pocket for about $9,000. Not too shabby. The living allowance is $2,300 per month and the $1,000 book stipend. So total paid to the school, $42,000. Total paid to you in this case is $21,000. You add that up, and that means your annual benefit for the GI Bill could be worth $63,000 per year, which is just amazing. So this is about your benefits. If you scroll down even farther, you can see programs that are available at the school. They're a yellow ribbon school. They have a student veterans group. You can even click here, and it'll take you to their veterans site. They are all eligible for military tuition assistance. We can see data about how our students, civilian students and veterans who are attending this school, achieving. We can even see how many complaints this school has received over the last couple of years. And then we got some more information down here. Also really important, so that you have a whole lot of information about schools. You can play around with different types of GI Bill benefits. If you want to think about if you want to use Chapter 30, it'll tell you what you'd be eligible for. Obviously, you go from $63,000 down to $17,000 per year. So you can at least play around with the different benefits. Also from here in the upper right hand corner, there's the additional resource links. This will take you to a guide for helping choose a school, how to submit a complaint about a school if you're having any problems. And then if you decide to use your GI Bill benefits and you haven't actually applied yet, you can click to this Apply for Education Benefits program, and you will be taken to the page to apply. All right, I'm going to go back to the presentation real quick and see if they're... all right, so the question is, what is the GPA requirement while using the GI Bill, Post911 GI Bill? There is no, unlike TA, there is no GPA requirement to use the GI Bill. However, you need to basically complete the course. So you can't withdraw from a course. They say you need to actually get a grade. So you can fail a course and you can take it again, and the VA will pay for it. But if you withdraw from a course and don't receive a grade, the VA will come back and will try to recoup their money. But that is a good question. Any other questions about the GI Bill or the GI Bill comparison tool? Okie dokie. So that right there, the Post911 GI Bill is an excellent benefit for veterans, spouses, dependents, people who are in the Guard and Reserve. We'll talk a little bit about this, but it is not necessarily the best benefit for active duty service members. While you're you're on active duty, you do not qualify for the very generous monthly housing allowance because you're already getting one. So, if I were to give you a hierarchy of choosing how to pay for school, I would try desperately to avoid using your GI Bill or advising people to use their GI Bill while they're on active duty. Instead, what they should probably be using is their military tuition assistance. So I'll drop out of this real quick. Go to that. I know that a couple people asked about this. So military tuition assistance is a program that is offered by each of the military services. Basically, in a nutshell, the Department of Defense, while you're on active duty and usually in the reserves, will pay up to about $4,500 per year to allow you to go to college, which is just pretty awesome. There are some limitations, as you can see right here. This is a Military OneSource article about the program. There are usually requirements you can't spend more than $250 per credit, so it's not like you can take a really expensive class. There's still a cap. Unlike the GI Bill, there are requirements that you actually have to pass the class to be reimbursed, and you need to make satisfactory academic progress. I'm not entirely sure if there is a GPA requirement to keep going, but I'm pretty sure there is. The cap is usually $4,500 per year. Each service may be a little different depending on how much money they have, and the cap per credit hour is $250 per semester credit hour, or $166 per quarter hour. As I said before, it's usually better to use TA first because you get it every year. GI Bill, you have a set limit number of benefits. It's called 36 months of benefits. So for every month of full-time enrollment that you're using your GI Bill, you lose a month. Versus TA just resets every year. So you always want to try to use TA first. So if you go to this program, if you go to this page on Military OneSource, you just type in Military OneSource and TA, it'll click you to all the different services and their page. You have to log in. So like Army is goarmyed.com, Marine Corps is some really long, drawn out URL. But each service has their own connection that you need to log in and file those. As someone who used both GI Bill and TA, GI Bill is pretty. You don't necessarily have to sign up for it before you start classes. It's better because it pays for your classes out. But you can start and then do it. TA doesn't work like that. You need to have a plan and fill out your applications before you start school. Because once you start school, I don't think they'll actually pay for it anymore. So you want to, if you're going to use TA, you want to make sure you get on that as soon as possible. I'm going to go back to the presentation and see if there are any questions about TA. Right. All right, so like I said before, if you're on active duty, you definitely want to do TA. If you're in the reserves, you still want to do TA first. Then you can use your GI Bill. But if you're in the service, you still want to use TA first. If you're on active duty, you want to try to save your GI Bill benefits if you can until after you do that. So that brings us to federal financial aid. We're going to go over how do we apply, what are some tips and tricks, how do these benefits interact with each other. So let's talk about, so federal financial aid is available to anyone who's attending an approved school. There is a little bit of a difference. Most schools that are approved for TA and for GI Bill are also approved for Department of Ed, but not all. There's a few. Usually some of your smaller for-profit schools are not. So we'll get into the benefits. Let's go to the next page. So in terms of what is available for people who apply for financial aid, there are grants. Grants are money that you do not have to pay back. This is money that the federal government gives people to encourage them to attend college education. There are student loans that if you do take out that you will have to pay back. In general, they're a little bit better than the private student loans they have to offer. And then there are a host of other programs that you may be eligible by applying for federal financial aid. We'll talk about this. The first thing you should know is that even though you may be eligible for the GI Bill, you also may be eligible for the Pell Grant. This is a weird quirk. I mean, this may be more information than you need to know, but before the Post-911 GI Bill passed, Congress really wanted to do something for veterans, so they said that veterans, even if you were using GI Bill benefits, the old GI Bill benefits, you were still eligible for Pell Grants. But then, a couple months later, they passed this very generous new GI Bill benefit, and they never went back and changed the law. So now that means even though you're receiving this very generous GI Bill, which George Washington may pay you up to $62,000, you may be eligible to receive a Pell Grant up to almost $6,000 from the Department of Education. So I strongly encourage anyone who is advising someone or is thinking about themselves that even if your GI Bill is going to cover it all, that you should at least submit an application for federal financial aid. And we'll go into a little bit about that, about how to do that. But because you may be eligible for grants and you didn't even know it. So how do you do that? You fill out the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA. I'm going to emphasize the word free. There are lots of services out there that charge people to apply for a free form. Please don't, you can, you're more than welcome, it's your money, but if it was I wouldn't let my kids pay someone to fill out a free form. So the website is fafsa.ed.gov. We'll go to that page right now. Make the transition. So this is the website, fafsa.ed.gov. You click here and you want to start a new FAFSA. You just click through this, enter a student's name, and fill it out. I think on average this application takes about 15 to 20 minutes to fill out. If I told you that you could, tomorrow that you could spend 15 to 20 minutes and earn $100, would you do it? Doing anything, cleaning up the bedroom, you would of course do it. So, I would strongly encourage you to spend the 15, 20 minutes to fill out this information to see if you're eligible for thousands of dollars, because the worst thing that can happen is they tell you no, and you wasted 10 to 15 minutes. There are going to be a number of questions here about taxes. The good thing is that, before that used to be a real pain, but now they can actually import your tax information, and so that you don't even have to go look at your old taxes, which is awesome. All right, so this is the FAFSA. Let's go back to the other presentation. I'm making a transition between the two. Okay, so one of the most important tips and tricks is that A, you should apply. Don't assume that you don't qualify. 2 is you want to submit your FAFSA early. While the federal pot of money is not limited, when you submit your FAFSA to the Department of Education, and then that FAFSA eventually gets submitted to the school that you're going to attend, that makes you eligible for state and local grants and scholarships. And that state and local grants and scholarships is like first come, first served. So the earlier you can get this application into the queue, the more likely you are to get free money from other entities other than the federal government. The last thing I'm going to say about this, just about federal financial aid generally, is that you want to take out federal student loans last. You want to take the free money first, money someone else is going to give you to go to school. Put your money in that you can afford to put in without putting yourself too much into debt, and then taking in the last resort, take out student loans. It's not to say you shouldn't take out student loans. I'm just saying you definitely want to prioritize it in that way. Free money, and your money in the future that you would have. The other thing is we're talking about free money, scholarships and grants. I know that no one clicked on this, but there are lots of scholarships and grants out there. There's a ton of websites. Please do not pay to apply for a scholarship or grant. There's some scams out there. One of the best websites that people don't know about is this NRD website. When I was a veterans advocate, I spent a long time combing through every website we could, with different agencies, combing through every different website offering services to veterans and their families, and so they collected it in this NRD website. So let's go look at that real quick. So this is the National Resource Directory. You can type in a resource, or you can scroll down here. There's educate. It says find information by category. You click on find information, education and training. And then there's search filters on the left. There are scholarships and other financial assistance. You click on here, and then there are lots of different resources that are available to you. Education benefit programs, state and local territories, basically tons of different programs that are available to you. All right. Go back to the presentation. Sorry for all the transitions. I just figured you'd rather see these websites so you at least know what they look like. Again, if you're going to only remember one website, it's the GI Bill comparison tool. There's also a list in the Department of Education website. The one thing about scholarships is that, some people do the shotgun approach. They just like to shoot out as many applications as they can. Just when you do apply for scholarships, think about the person who gave the money for that scholarship wants to feel special and wants to feel wanted. So they want to feel like you actually care about their scholarship. So, I would encourage you to find a little bit fewer scholarships and go after them a little harder. Really try to sell the point of how grateful you are and how much that scholarship would mean to you personally, versus just sending the same letter to every scholarship that you have available. All right, that gets us into federal loans. So again, the priority is money someone else is going to give you: GI Bill, TA, grants, scholarships. Second priority is money that you can pay out of pocket. If you can work while you're in school, or you have money that you can get from your family, however you pay for school. And then as the last resort, there are federal loans. There are something called subsidized and unsubsidized loans. So subsidized loans, that means if you take out the loan while you're in school, interest does not accrue. So to put that in another way, I take out $1,000 to pay for school, and I go to school for 2 years. When I start repaying my loan 2 years later, it's still $1,000. If it is unsubsidized, that means while I'm in school, it's going to be accruing interest. So if I take $1,000 and I'm in school for 2 years, when I get out and start repaying my loans, I'll probably be paying $1,200 because $200 has accrued while I'm in school. The good news about federal student loans is that usually the interest rates are fixed. I don't know if anyone in the webinar has non-fixed interest rate loans right now. I've watched my private student loans creep up 2 or 3% in the last couple months, which is a little disturbing. That basically means my monthly payment is constantly increasing as the interest rates change across the country. There are some good advantages to taking federal student loans. For instance, there is something called IncomeDriven Repayment Plans. IncomeDriven Repayment Plans means that after you get out, you're responsible for repaying your loans, but if you're like most college students when you graduate, they don't necessarily have the best job. They have a job. They'll be lucky to have a job, and if they do have a job, it doesn't pay a whole lot. So you can ask the Department of Education to put you on income-driven repayment, which then says that we're only going to charge you 10% of, basically up to 10% of your discretionary income. So that means if you make less than $20,000, your payment's going to be $0. If you make $25,000, your payment might be $10. And so for people who aren't making a whole lot of money, especially right after they get out of college, this is a great program because then you can be repaying your loans. You're building the credit file of repaying your loans, but you're not having those huge payments. All right, any questions about that? We'll get into a whole lot about this in the next ones later. These are things that are available. The question was, for income-driven repayment plans, does interest still accrue? Yes. So, yes, the interest does still accrue. However, if you continue to stay in an income-driven repayment plan for a certain period of time, depending on the one you're in, 20 or 25 years, anything you have left at the end of that time will be forgiven. Or there's another program called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness, which says that if you, after you get out of school, you work full-time in a federal, state, city, or a nonprofit organization, and you are in an income-driven repayment plan, or you can actually have your loans forgiven after 10 years. So you could have if you're not making a whole lot of money because you're working in a nonprofit, you spend 10 years, you're doing your service, making those low payments. After 10 years, whatever you have left after all the interest will be forgiven. You also have what are called deferment and forbearance rights that basically say that if you do get in trouble, you have a couple months. You can take up to 6 months after you graduate, and another 6 months later on to put your loans on hold if something happens. And God forbid something were ever to happen to you. My wife and I talk about this all the time. She's definitely afraid that if anything ever happens to me, she's going to be saddled with my student loans. And I would say with my federal student loans that if something did happen to me, my student loans go away. Another benefit is that if you are severely disabled, you are unable to work, that you are eligible to have your loans discharged. Recently, Erica, I'll answer your question in 1 second about the FFEL loans. Recently, the Department of Ed just last week announced that anyone who has a 100% disability rating from the VA or has been deemed totally permanently disabled or unable to work from the VA, they are automatically eligible to have their student loans discharged. So if you know anyone who is 100% disabled or totally permanently disabled by the VA, they are eligible to have their loans discharged right now, no tax consequences. So that's pretty awesome. All right, Erica asked me why aren't FFEL loans aren't included in the public service loan forgiveness. So FFEL loans are federal student loans that were made before 2008. In 2008, they basically moved all loans into this program called the Direct Student Loan Program. So that in 2008, they created the direct student loan, it already existed, but all loans became direct loans, and that is when they created the public service loan forgiveness program. Now that being said, it is possible for people who have FFEL loans to consolidate those FFEL loans into a direct loan. There are some consequences for doing that. We'll go over that a lot in the next hour. But you can convert from FFEL to direct loans, and those direct loans are what are eligible for public service loan forgiveness. A good question, Eric. Any other questions about the advantages of federal student loans? Yes. So the question is, but you lose the months you paid into FFEL. Yes. So just to put a finer point on who is eligible for public service loan forgiveness, you need to have the right type of loan, which is a direct loan. You need to be in the right type of job, meaning you are in a nonprofit, and you need to be in the right type of repayment, full-time in a nonprofit or a government agency, and you need to be in the right type of repayment plan. And so any of those repayment plans are either any of the income-driven repayment plans or a 10-year fixed payment plan. And if you meet those three requirements, the right type of loan, the right type of job, and the right type of repayment plan, and for every month that you are in all three of those at the same time, you earn credits toward the 10-year repayment. So you have to make 120 eligible payments while you have all three of those meeting together. And so, as I said, this program was created in 2008. It's now 2018. We are finally seeing people who have managed to figure it all out, kind of coming on the other end of this. So it'll be intriguing to see how many people actually are able to meet all those requirements. And all that being said, income-driven repayment plan, you can switch. You don't have to stay in income-driven repayment plan. So you can, start off in the income-driven repayment plan while you're, you're not making a whole lot of money, and then if you're able, you're a little bit more financially secure later, you can switch back to one of the other repayment plans. So there's a lot of flexibility. That's one of the great things about federal loans, is you always have that flexibility versus other loans, which we'll get into, you might not have that flexibility. Good questions. Any other questions? Sorry, I'll read this question. There seems to be a lot of confusion around having to sign up for public service loan forgiveness or not, and services are terrible about helping out with this. Yes, this is an issue we have discussed at great lengths, and I won't get too much into it now. But let's just say that we have put a bunch of stuff on our website to help, and we can cover this in the next week, that will help people navigate this process. But yeah, unfortunately, you can't expect the servicer, your loan service. That's the person when I don't know if you have a mortgage or a credit, but basically the person who sends you the bill, the person who you deal with to pay your student loan bills, not the Department of Education. They contract out with someone else to do it. When you want to enroll in one of these programs, the person you're talking to on the phone might not know what they're talking about, or they might be hurried, or they might have incentives to be doing something else. But the bottom line is you need to be an advocate for yourself. And so that is why we have some tools that can help you give you the magic words. So we have a tool, I'll actually pull it up now. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. So on our website we have a tool called Repay Student Debt. This is assuming my internet's working. Repay Student Debt. It basically asks you certain questions. What type of loans do you have? Are you behind in your payments? Can you make the full payments? Not sure. Do you have to do service member? Yes. And then it basically says, here are your options, here's some information, and it tells you the keywords that you need to ask for from the loan servicer to really make sure that's clear. I know it's not just student loans. It's like anything. If you call, your bank or, your like cell phone contract, the person you're talking to isn't a very high paid person, and they, some are great and some are not so great, and so you need to learn to be an advocate for yourself, and all that starts with understanding kind of what your rights are. And so if you know that you're eligible for this, you can put yourself into it. But yes, it is very frustrating, and we'll talk at great length about what happens. The good news, again, like I said, we'll talk about this next week, is that the Department of Education Congress recently admitted that this was a big problem, so they created a big pool of money for people who thought they were eligible and who thought they were eligible but basically missed it for some reasons. So that process is going to be open to people. I don't know as much about that. Bonnie, who is not here, she'll be here for the next week, next presentation. She can go late, so hopefully we can join you for that one. But keep them coming. These are great questions. Any other questions? Okay, well, let's keep going a little further. Despite the advantages of being federal student loans, while they are better than other loan products, generally better than other loan products that are out there, you need to know that federal student loans are serious. They are going to get their money back. The federal government has kind of extraordinary tools to recover federal student loans. They can garnish your wages without a court order. They can seize your tax refund or your Social Security check. They can't come to your work and harass your employer and stuff like that, but in general, the federal government's going to get your money back. And while it is possible, it's very hard to you go into bankruptcy to discharge your federal student loans. And so just know that if you do take them out, you're taking a serious commitment to repay those loans. And that's why I said take the free money first, put the money that you can second, and then if you all have to, take federal student loans. That gets us to the other type of loans that are out there. They're private student loans. In general, they have higher costs than federal student loans. I think at one point we did a study and we found that 95% of private student loans required you to have a cosigner. I had to have my grandma co-sign my loans. It was very embarrassing. Afterwards, they have less than flexible repayment options. Usually, you may have one or two options. Have all these different income-driven repayment plans. Maybe not. Usually not. And like once you're in an option, you kind of have to stay there. There are some loan programs you've heard. Say if I have a cosigner, that if you start repaying your loans on time, you can get that cosigner off your loans. Some people do offer that. I have heard complaints, from a number of consumers who said that it's not as easy as they would like, and sometimes they have to work really hard to get their people off those private student loans. So in general, you should try to if you're going to take loans, try to maximize your federal student loans first. Okay, any other questions about private student loans, federal student loans, or the like? So that gets us to the next slide. This is the last slide. One of the things that we do at the Bureau is that if you have problems with your loan programs after you take them out, you can file a complaint with us about those issues. So, Amy, if you're one of those people who have been having problems with public service loan forgiveness, or someone has been having problems with their loan service, and you definitely file a complaint with us. I personally had to file a complaint last week. My loan servicer changed. I wasn't notified, and they're expecting me to make a payment. I didn't even know. I couldn't even log into the system. So I filed a complaint within 36 hours. All of a sudden, I was contacted and was able to make my payments. And I wasn't behind. I just, they never told me where I needed to go. So, definitely, if you have an issue, submit a complaint to us. If you haven't really taken out the student loan yet, or the person you're dealing with hasn't taken out the student loan yet, and they're having a problem with the school, you can actually go and file a complaint at the Department of Education. That is then routed kind of around all the different agencies, so they have their own complaint system. And then we use those complaints to basically make sure that loan servicers, like Amy asked about, are actually doing their jobs and getting consumers in getting borrowers in the right programs they should be. All right, that is the paying for college. We did talk a little bit about. I'm sorry. I'll take 3 or 4 minutes to talk about saving for college. I think at least one of you is a parent, and 2 of you had asked about saving for college. So, what are the big questions about saving for college? When should you start? You should start right away. Doesn't matter if you're running late. The power of compounding interest is there on your side. But let's say you have a new baby born today. You invest $100. By the time that student is in college, or 18, at about 6% rate of return, that $100 will be worth $270. Now, that sounds like a whole lot. But if you had to borrow, if you didn't save the money, and then instead you had to borrow $270, that $270 would actually cost you $400 to fully repay. So the $100 you save now would actually prevent you from repaying $400 in student loans down the pike. Where should you invest your savings fund? There are a lot of different options. There are 529s, Cloverdales, In general, these state 529 plans are usually good plans. They're basically the money that you put in now can grow tax-free. So if you put in the $100 and it's worth $270 less more when you get it out, then you don't have to pay taxes on that growth. So that's a good place to put money for your students. And some states actually offer tax benefits for when you do that. So something to consider. There are two different types of 529 plans. There's prepaid tuition. That's where you basically you lock in this year's rate. Or there's like a college savings plan, which is like just like kind of an investment plan that you can take out later. For me, that's something. It's kind of a tough choice. I do some research. I will say this: tuition rates definitely go up. If you're going to be going to school in the next 5 years, I think that makes a whole lot of sense. If you're kind of beyond the 5-year horizon, this is just Patrick Campbell talking. We have no idea what anything in this world is going to look like 5 years from now. The rate of tuition increases have gone up 6-7%, almost 6-7% every year. Something has got to give. So I'm not sure that's a sustainable growth. So it's something to think about. So when, as soon as possible, where should you put your money? Probably 529s, but definitely look into it. I'm not giving you any financial advice, but just definitely take a look at those. How much should you save? Don't get overwhelmed. You don't have to save for all of college. I think I've seen people say, if you can just get 1 year of college saved, you're getting yourself well on your way. There are some studies to say, especially for younger kids, that just having a college saving account in the student's name with just even $100 in it means that student is more likely to go to college and graduate. Just because they are oriented, they know you've made an investment in them. So while there might be financial benefits of doing it, there's also just psychological effects to it. Just know that not all 529 plans are the same. Each state has their own rules about it. Some have huge fees. Most don't, but some have some pretty hefty fees. So you just want to make sure you look at the fees. The different types of fees that you have, could be administrative fee, enrollment fee, annual maintenance fee, underlying investment fee, sales fee. All that being said, you don't need to remember any of those. Just look at the fees. Don't just sign up for it because you want your money to be working for you.